Okay, good morning and welcome everyone to Key to Redemption. This is episode 14, and this one is going to be called Everlasting Strength. And this is the Dvar Malchus of Parshas Matos and Mase, in which we conclude the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. So the Rebbe starts with the idea that this Shabbos is called Shabbos Chazak. And Shabbos Chazak means the Shabbos of strength. Why is it called Shabbos Chazak, the Shabbos of strength? Because we conclude a portion of Torah, not a portion, a whole book of Torah, which happens 5 times a year. But the last time, because we have 5 books of the Torah, but the last time it's not on Shabbos, it happens on Simchas Torah. So, but when it happens on Shabbos, it's four Shabbos, so 4 unique, powerful Shabbos. And the reason why they're called powerful is because at the conclusion of the reading of the Torah, the whole congregation announces, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek. Be strong, and let us strengthen ourselves. And then the one who reads in the Torah repeats it another time, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek. And the connection to that, the strengthening of, we get strength simple because Torah is called strength. So when we study Torah and we learn Torah, especially if we do it all together, we are strengthened by that spiritual, godly download that comes downloaded into us. The Rebbe doesn't say this, I'm just adding. It says, Hashem ozli amayite, the Torah is called strength. So when we all study Torah together, it becomes part of us, it strengthens us in a very deep spiritual way, and then from the spiritual, it comes down into the physical as well, as we know, because everything is really connected. Now, the origins is very interesting. In footnote number 4, the Rebbe says the origins of this whole idea of strength at the conclusion of a book of Torah, I never noticed this, I never heard of this before, is because I studied this a few times. I don't remember ever seeing this in the Rebbe's. It's footnote number 4. It's just interesting that it comes from what Hashem said to Yehoshua, to Joshua, when Yehoshua finished writing the Torah, because we know that Moshe passed away at the end of the Torah. And the question is, who wrote those last few verses describing Moshe's passing? So there's one opinion that Moshe himself wrote it. He wrote it with tears. So he's writing kind of that he's passed away even before he passes away. Another opinion is that Yeshua concluded the last few verses. So we look at the book of Yehoshua, the next book, which is already the book of, it's not on the level of the 5 books of the Torah, the book of Joshua. It's the first book of Nevi'im. So in that, the first book of the prophets, over there, it opens up with God saying twice to Yehoshua, Chazak v'yamatz, be strong and powerful. So we see Hashem is saying Chazak. So simply it's because Hashem is strengthening him to give him power to take on the leadership of the Jewish people, to bring the Jewish people into the land, to fight the wars, and so on and so forth. So according to that, Chazak is regarding the future. But what the Rebbe is bringing, I guess, I don't know where it says this, what the source for this is, that it really was a continuation to what just happened. Because Yehoshua just completed the Torah, that's why he became strong. And that's the Chazak. But there is an addition. Because when God says to Yehoshua Chazak, he only says it twice. Chazak v'amatz, 2 times in the beginning of chapter 1 of the book of Yehoshua, you find twice God saying to Yehoshua, Chazak v'amatz, be strong. Not 3 times. Our custom, Jewish custom, is to add a 3rd one. And based on the idea that Jewish custom is sometimes higher even than a mitzvah. There's a concept that we speak about and learn, that minog Yisrael Torah, that the minog of the Jewish people is considered Torah. Not only is it considered Torah, hold on 1 second. It's considered actually higher Torah than regular Torah. It's deeper. It's a discussion onto its own. So the 3rd Chazak, we can understand why it comes from us and not from above, because that's the depth of it. It will become clearer actually as we learn today's this episode. Okay, so now we understand. We finish the book of Torah. We say Chazak, Chazak. We strengthen ourselves. Now, it's not only that we say Chazak, be strong, but we say it 3 times, which falls in line with one of the episodes we had, episode number 9, which was called Bottoms Up, very important episode. Over there, we discussed at great length how the power of strength is associated with the number 3. Last problem, have a Chazak 3 times as a Chazak. So when we say be strong, be strong, be strong 3 times, it's the ultimate of strength. So we become super strong. And this is exciting. So if you take things seriously, Torah seriously, it's really exciting because we're coming up to a Shabbos in which we will become super strong. Now, the question over here is, we've done it already 3 times this year. In the end of the book of Bereshis, Genesis. We did it in the end of the book of Shmos, the book of Exodus. We did it in the end of the book of Vayikra, which is Leviticus. Now we're going to do it the 4th time. So what is unique about the 4th time? What's the connection, the Rebbe says, between the unique strength that we're getting in the fact that we're finishing the 4th book of Torah? And the main thing is that we need to understand, okay, the truth is that question he deals with later, doesn't bring that right over here. The main question that he asks, why is it that we're finishing the 4th book of Torah, which is giving us a unique power and unique strength we're going to see later, which is quite stronger and different than the first 3 times we did it. The 4th one is very unique, as we'll see. But what's its connection to the particular time that we're doing it? We are completing, because we know the Torah that we read in the Torah is always connected to the time of the year. So the question is, what is this empowerment that we're getting by completing the 4th book of Torah? How does it relate to the unique time that we're in right now, which is the time known as the 3 weeks, which the 3 weeks is the time of mourning. It's a time of darkness, generally, a time of that is between the 2 fast days, which are most difficult time on the Jewish calendar. The Rebbe asks, it would seem to be that it's the opposite. It's a time when we feel weak, not the time that we're strong. And you see that the Jewish people were defeated, temporarily, of course, but there was a defeat. Our temples were destroyed during these 3 weeks. Exile began, which is all a weakening of the power of holiness and godliness in this world. And yet, in the midst of that, we are reading and we're concluding the portion of the Torah, which is all about being empowered and being strong. It seems to be opposite ideas. It seems to be it doesn't belong in this time, the strengthening, because this is a time that we become weakened, not strengthened. Now, the simple answer would be that everybody would give, that's exactly the point. When we are weak, we need the strength. So the Torah kind of comes to the rescue. God orchestrated that when we need the strength the most, because we've suffered a big loss and we feel broken and we feel weakened. So now we need the strength of the Torah to come and strengthen us. And that would mean, and that's the reason why Hashem has made it that we always complete the 4th book of Torah during the 3 weeks to kind of infuse us with power that we shouldn't be completely shattered. Okay. The Rebbe doesn't like that answer. It could possibly, then he says, that would mean that the strength is not connected and is not derived from the 3 weeks. It comes to counter the negative of the 3 weeks. So then it's not coming from this 3 weeks. It's not related to the time. It's an answer to the time. But the Rebbe says, no, we have to say that since it comes out in the 3 weeks, is that there is something about the 3 weeks itself that is giving us strength. The strength is coming from the time, not as a response to the time. So we need to see, that's always the Rebbe's way of looking at things. And he proves it, not proving it, but as nuanced in the idea that we call this Shabbos Chazak. It's the Shabbos of strength. In other words, it's not just we're saying, okay, it's 3 weeks, it's Shabbos. And now let's bring in the Chazak. Then you wouldn't call it Shabbos Chazak. Then you would just say Chazak, because the strength is coming from outside. If you're calling it Shabbos Chazak, means that the time itself, the Shabbos, is providing the Chazak. It's the strong Shabbos. It's the Shabbos. Well, the Shabbos is part of the 3 weeks, which is a week Shabbos in a sense, weaker than all the Shabboses, than the rest of the year. No. It's a Shabbos Chazak. That the strength is coming from the Shabbos itself, and the strength is coming in a sense really from the entire 3-week period, which seems to be the opposite. It's a 3-week period of weakness, not a from which we need healing from, and so on and so forth, not strength. So we need it deeper. And we need to open up. This is going to fit into the whole discussion that we were saying. We have to open up the darkness of the exile itself and to discover its inner light, its inner power, its inner geula point. And when you find the geula point in the exile, then not only is the exile not weakening and the 3 weeks not weakening, but the exile is actually the source of enormous strength and power. And then the exile itself becomes redemption. You see where this is all going. Okay. So to understand all of this, that was chapter 1. To understand this, we'll understand it by the connection of the Chazak to the individual Torah portion. Although the Chazak is announced in commemoration to the completing of the entire book, but since it is particularly attached to the last portion, we have to say that in every last portion of Torah, there's a certain element of Chazak. There's something about the last portion of Torah that provides the Chazak. In other words, we can't just attribute it to the entire book of Numbers. We have to specifically find the strength in the last Torah portion. So the question is, what is the particular vitamin that's in the last Torah portion that gives us strength? Now, it happens to be that in most years, not all years, but in most years, these 2 Torah portions are combined. Matos, in the end of Parshas of the book of Numbers, we read 2 Torah portions together, which is Matos Mase. We do it this year, and we did it also in 1991, the year the Rebbe was talking. And in most of the years, it's uncommon that they're divided. It happens, but not that common. It's rare. Most years, Matos Mase is together, which means that we're going to have to find the strength both in Parshas Matos and in Parshas Masei, 2 Torah portions, because they both become part of the concluding portion, which provides the strength. So what is the theme of strength of Matos? What is the theme of strength of Masei? And what is the theme of extra strength that we get from Matos Masei blended together? And here the Rebbe already does a really cool thing. He says, since we talked about what do we do at the end of the reading of the Torah? We say 3 times, Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek. So we have 3 powers, which all merge into one powerful jumbo force of power that we all get. But since we say 3 times, we can imply that one level of strength, certain nutrients of strength, if we might say, we get from the one Chazak belongs to Matos, the other Chazak belongs to the Torah portion of Masei, and the third one comes from the combination of both together. Because when both of them merge together, they create a new concoction, if you might say, holy concoction, or holy power that is unique and is a blend of both of them together, creates a new identity, which is a third element of strength. So we need to understand, that's the whole point that we're going to be learning. What is the strength coming from Matos? What is the strength coming from Masei? And the strength of coming them from both together. With the Rebbe's awesome analytical abilities, what does he do? He right away asks the question. He says, I understand. The strength coming from Parshas Matos is pretty obvious, just by looking at the name. Matos means a staff. In the regular context of the Torah reading, the verse says like this. Let me first say what it says. The verse says, speak to the heads of the tribes. Daber Aroshe Hamatos. Hashem says to Moshe, speak to the heads of the tribes. The tribes are called the Matos. However, and which means to speak to the leaders. And this code goes on to tell us the laws of vows and the nullification of vows. However, what does it mean? Why are the tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes, why are they called Matos? What's the connection? Why are tribes called Matos? So let's analyze the word. Matos comes to the word mate. Mate means a staff. Why are the tribes called staffs? Because what's the more common name for the tribes? Shevet, Shevatim, the 12 Shvatim. What does a Shevet mean? A branch. So you have a tree, and then you have branches. Although the Jewish people are divided into 12 tribes, the reason we call them, we want to emphasize that they're not 12 complete different nations. They're one nation, they're one people, but they have, just like a tree is one tree with different branches. So we branch off into the branching of Ruvain and the branching of Shimon, and each one is a branch from one tree. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the one tree, the trunk of the tree, and the tribes, and then all of us, each one of us becomes, families become the little twigs, the smaller branches and the twigs, and finally each one of us is a little leaf or a fruit or whatever it is of that tree. But the main primary tribes are the main big branches that come out. That's called Shevet. Now, what are branches made out of? It's tree, it's wood. Now, what happens when you snap the branch off the tree? What happens to it? It becomes a stick. And that's negative because you're kind of disconnecting it. But there is a positive of a branch being snapped off the tree, is that when the branch is on the tree, it's still soft and pliable. When it becomes snapped off the tree and detached, it becomes firm and hard. It becomes a hard stick. You can make a hard piece of wood. It's after it's been off. If you're ever hiking, I do hiking a lot, and you forgot to bring your hiking poles and your knees are hurting you. Like it happens all the time. If you're in a forest, try to find a hiking stick. If you find a soft branch that just fell off the tree, and that's not going to do you too good. But sometimes you find a piece of wood that has been laying out there for a long time, and it's not wet and it's firm. It's a good hiking stick. It has to be firm. It has to be strong. So now let's understand why the Jewish people are called Shevet. But when we are emphasizing they're called Matos, it's a sign that we're talking about strength, firmness. Okay, so now the name of the Torah portion is borrowed from the first word, not the first word, from the first identifiable word, which isn't random. In this case, it's Matos. Speak to the heads of the Matos, which means a stick, a strong stick. The Rebbe says the word a stick conjures up in a person's mind the power of strength. Because if someone is coming at you with a stick, with a baseball bat, God forbid, it is much scarier than when the person is just using their hands. They got a stick. People use stick as a weapon. A stick represents strength. So much so that a king, a sign of rulership, was to hold a certain staff, a stick. There's a verse that says, Matos ois. The verse in 9 in Yecheskel. Matos ois. The strength, the staff of strength, El Shiftei Moishlim, to the tribe of leaders. The rulers, they carry this staff. So when you hear the word Matos, it rings of strength. Okay. So the Chazak, which we said before is strength, fits very well with Matos. But when we are talking about Parshas Masei, let's analyze the second Torah. What does Masei mean? Journeys. It's talking about the Jewish people journeying for 42 journeys throughout the desert. Now, the notion of journey means to move away from where you are. Now, moving from place to place does not conjure up in our heart and our soul and our experience and our feelings a feeling of strength. Quite on the contrary, when a person lives in their home and they don't move away and they're in one place for a long time, you're strong. If you're moving from place to place, that generally is showing on a weakness. One of the things on a credit application, you'll see when they ask us when you apply for credit, they ask you how many years are you living at your current address. If a person has been moved to 15 times in the last 10 years, they're not so happy with that. That's a minus. The reason for that is it means you're wishy-washy. You're not stable. You're moving from place to place. And we know also when Hashem tells Abraham, Lech Lecha, travel, we know Hashem had to give him a special person. So the fact that the Jewish people were in the desert and they were running around, they didn't stay in one place. So the word, we have to look at just the word, the name of the Torah portion, which conveys its essence, which the name of the essence of Parshas Masei is movement and journey. The question then becomes, where do you have in Masei the element of strength? Matos we understand, but not in Masei. Now, to make the problem even a bigger problem, because that's the Rebbe's style, to really create a big, big problem before he overhauls the whole thing, he says, now, even if you can find some element of strength in the Masei, it would be less than the strength of Matos, no? Matos, on the first glance, right on the outside, shows on strength, a powerful stick, a staff. However, from the positioning, when do we say chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek? At the conclusion of Parshas Masei, and that we do every year. Because remember we said that some years it's not combined, Matos, Masei. That means that the main strength is related to Masei, not to Matos. Matos also has strength, but the real potent stuff is in Masei. So that really makes the problem even bigger. Masei doesn't seem to be a message of real super strength. Matos does, not Masei. That's the question. It seems to imply that our main strengthening comes from the Masei, not from the Matos, which doesn't seem to fit the name. That's the question. So here we go into chapter 3. The explanation for it, the Rebbe says, is as follows. When we talk about strength, there's two types of strength. There is strength when you don't have any adversaries. There's no one there to oppose you. Okay, you're the only person in the island. You're living alone. You landed a shipwreck on an island. You're the only person on the island, and you are the mighty ruler of the island. No one contests you. No one opposes you. Whatever you tell the monkeys to do, or whatever creatures are there, you're in control over the whole situation. You made this your island. Okay, that's nice, and that works, and that's strength. Okay, because there's no. But then there was a story that someone else comes on the block. Someone else was shipwrecked, and they ended up on the island besides you. Now it takes two to tangle. Look what's going on over here. You want to be the king of the island, but there's someone else who's claiming that he's the boss over the island. And he claims that he really was here already before you ever came. He just left the island. He's returning to his kingdom. So now you have conflict. So now comes the next level of strength. To really show strength is, can you defeat your opponent and establish yourself as the monarch, as the power on the island, after your power has been challenged by some by another being who's contesting your authority. If you can vanquish and drive the other king into the sea, send them off on a ship away from the island, and you claim victory. Or if you can turn him into your servant on the island, he works for you, then you've shown your strength. That's another level of strength. That's a much deeper level. We're talking about 3 times strength. Didn't we say that earlier? Chazak, chazak, and this chazek. So we're going to highlight number 3. Since we're highlighting number 3, the significance of the number 3 implies that there is more than one being. Number 2, the Rebbe says, is not really strength. Number 2 is when everybody is biting their nails and watching and saying, who's going to win the fight? Number 2 represents conflict. Someone showed up, and they're claiming ownership, and you're there crying out, you're the owner. And so now you're going to war, right? At the time of war, and there's 2 powers and 2 forces, and you don't know who's going to win, then you can't claim strength. So 2 is not a strong number. Where is there strength? There is strength in number 1, and there is strength in number 3. The strength of number 1 is no one contests your ownership. The strength in number 3 is someone challenged your real estate. Someone is challenging your ownership of your house. Someone claims they own this property. Someone claims they have this parking spot. Whatever the conflict may be, other than on 2 people on an island, whatever that conflict may be. Now, if you end up being the victor in the situation, and you can prove that you are the one who really owns it, and cause the other to let go or to leave, or even better, to become your ally and to support you, that's the ultimate level of strength. And that's the strength of number 3, because 3 has 2 inside of it. 2 meaning an opposing force, and number 3 comes and is the dominance of party A over party B within the context where there is 2 already, and yet A overpowers. And that is the significance of number 3. Based on that, we can understand why the main power is the power of Masei and not so much the power of Matos, even though Matos also works as the chazak of number 3, which means the strength even when there is an adversary. But let me put it this way: if the question over here would be, we'll soon see what. Hold on a moment. We'll soon analyze the unique strength, where the strength is coming from in Matos and where the strength is coming from in Masei. Okay, two powers, two different types of strength that we'll see in a moment. If we would be talking about the strength of number 1, then Matos would win. Matos would be the ultimate power. But if we're talking about the strength that number 3 represents, over there, Masei is more important. Masei shows on a deeper strength. And since the strength that we are talking about over here, and our strength as a Jewish people, and our purpose in this world is the strength of number 3, not the strength of number 1. Therefore, the main primary element of strength is going to be from Parshas Masei and not from Parshas Matos. Okay? But in order for it to be even the ultimate perfection of strength, it's going to be the combination and the fusion of the strength of Matos and the strength of Masei together to unify. In other words, the primary strength is Masei, but yet add a little spice from the strength of Matos, you're going to get the ultimate strength. And that's because we're talking about the strength where there is already an adversary and the winning over the opponent, over the challenger. And over there, that's the reason the setup is that the primary strength belongs to Masei. Some years it's only Masei. But Matos also has a strength, has something to contribute, a different type of a strength. And then we combine both of them, and you have durability and unbreakability, and it's everlasting. And that's the ultimate when the 2 of them are together and we have a chazak. And soon later he's going to explain how that's related to the time of the 3 weeks. Really, really fascinating. So let's take a deeper dive. Now let's understand like this. Okay, go back to the guy on the island. Okay? The Matos strength, if you're the sole, if you're living on the island and you claimed ownership to the island, and suddenly someone else appears and they claim ownership to the island, and now there's a conflict. The strength of Matos is you grab a stick and you chase the guy off the island. So as you come running with that stick, so in the beginning, first it was 1. Okay, you're strong. You don't even need the stick. You're just 1. Everybody agrees you're the owner of the island. Once the challenger came and he started making problems, there's a weakening. Your place, there's number 2 has arrived. And now there's a challenge. It's your team versus you versus the other fellow. Now you find yourself a good stick, and you come in running at the guy with the stick. You come running at the guy with the stick, and he gets scared, and he takes off, and he runs off the island. You won. You claimed victory. Now you can stick the stick in, and you tie a flag to the top of it, and you are the winner. Okay, so let's apply that to God and the world. Okay, so first there is when God creates the world, God claimed ownership to the island, to the creation, because there's no one to challenge him. Comes Friday in creation, and guess who pops up? The snake comes up. And the snake says, come on, what are you talking about? If you eat from the tree, you will be like God. And guess what? You'll also be able to be a creator. So the snake has the secret. He's trying to dominate over the God's commandment. He's a challenger. That's number 2. Now the snake has such impact. Where do we see 2 coming into fruition? Very strong. We find it in how the world followed. What happened in the who gained strength over the world in the early stages of creation? The snake. The snake definitely seemed to have won the battle. First of all, he won the battle. The Rebbe doesn't say all of this. I'm trying to give words to make it a little more tangible to the idea that the Rebbe is bringing out of here. The snake is now giving Adam kind of won over Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava, and got them to eat from the tree of knowledge. And what happened to mankind? Mankind plummeted into darkness, and it showed itself very strongly during the time of the second millennium, because the entire world was on the snake side, not on God's side. God almost lost his kingdom. God forbid, was almost chased off the island. And God only had one person on his team, Noah and his family. That's it, one family. What did God do during the second millennium, when God's kind of jurisdiction over the world was almost completely lost, you might say, and there was an empire of Satan coming and controlling the world? What did God do? God grabbed a stick, and that was the flood. And he flooded all evil off the earth. He destroyed the satanic forces by just wiping them clean and surviving and allowing, his man to remain on the island. That's it. Noah. So that's a form of victory of Matos. Matos is stick. You come in with the power of God, only God, because he's in heaven, he's from above, and he can, exercise his power and chase the opponent off. So again, although it's in a sense related to number 3 already, why? Because God is reasserting his power already after he was challenged, and yet now God won the battle. But the way he won the battle was not by uplifting the opponent, not by transforming the world, but by eliminating his enemies. That's called, the Rebbe refers to that in the words of the Maimer, from above. God shoots from above. Usually the one that has air power is superior, because you can drop cluster bombs, God forbid. You can drop a nuclear. God went nuclear. He dropped his nuclear power, and that's it. Don't you dare even contest me. And he won. But that's not in any way like the real winning. That's not what really counts. What happened in the third millennium, which is number 3? The Rebbe says a different type of strength, not a strength coming from superior air power from above, but by working things out from below. Imagine, let's go back to the person on the island, in which the two adversaries start having a conversation, and they discuss and they talk. And maybe even instead of taking if you need really, if it really gets to a point where, you're trying to convince the other that you're right, and this is really, you're trying to prove it, and you're taking out all kinds of papers and all kinds of proofs that you were here first, and so this is your real estate, and so on and so on. Maybe it even requires, like animals do over territories, that you're going to have a bout, you're going to have a physical wrestling match. But in the end, the point is not to kill your enemy. The point is to, the one that puts the other one down is the victor. And what does the other one do? You acknowledge that I'm the one that owns this land. If you want to hang around over here and stay around and assist me in doing whatever, I'm building my empire on my island, good. If you want to leave town, you can do that as well. But the point over here is you acknowledge that I own this place, not that I chased you away and I overpowered you. I've convinced you, whatever the level of convincing is, whether it's through physical power, whether it's through through the argument. You win the argument. I prove it legally. Whatever it is, this is it. So let's take a look what happened in the third millennium. God's representative, which was Avram Avinu, Abraham, began to teach monotheism. And he began convincing the inhabitants of the world that were still in the satanic. Because even right after the flood, even after God used the stick, it didn't take long for the forces of the other side to gain hold again of creation through Nimrod and all the other troublemakers, and they all rebelled against God again. But this time, instead of God using the stick, he used a good lawyer. He had Abraham come, and Abraham started making the arguments, and slowly but surely he created a family. Not only that, he converted massive amount of people to this monotheistic belief. So that's a whole different. Now, it's not as quick. You know what? The flood took a few 40 days, and God got the job done. Because if you're using military power, if you're going nuclear from above, you can do it 1, 2, 3. But if you're going to work your way out from below, in other words, you can acknowledge the arguments that your enemy is making, that your adversary, that your opponent is making, and you're going to refute them. That takes so long. It's a legal battle. Legal battles can last, as we know, years and years until it is decided that you're the winner. And especially till it's decided that the other side agrees to compromise and to agree that you're the winner. So Abraham begins this process. And the Rebbe refers to this process called milmata lamayla. You're working from the bottom up, not from above. There's the strength of God coming from above. There's the strength of Hashem coming from below. Usually God's strength coming from below is coming through the souls, through the God's representative. It's not a divine act directly from above. God sending down angels from above to turn over Sodom and Amorah. That's another example of God losing his patience, if you might say, and firing from above. It's sometimes necessary to demonstrate power from above. But most of the time, God does not want that, because that's not thorough. A real thorough transformation, where there is an enemy, where there is another opinion, is to flip it over from below. For that, God invested himself into us, and primarily into the Jewish people, and to a certain degree, a spark in every human being. And our work is to change the world from within, from the bottom, bit by bit, piece by piece. But when we finally accomplish it, it's thorough, it's complete, and it's everlasting. Because again, if you'll chase the guy off the island with your stick, you never know who he's going to come back. He's going to come back and bring his big brother, and they're going to come back with 2 sticks, and you're left with 1. You never know. Eventually, there's always the possibility. Obviously, by God, there isn't the possibility to defeat God, but it's never ending. Why is it not ending? Because there's always the possibility of a challenge to come again. But if the way you make all the arguments, transform bit by bit until everybody is convinced in your truth, then that's permanent, that's lasting, that's forever, and so on and so forth. So the Rebbe says that's the difference between the strength of Matos and the strength of Mase. Matos is the strength, it's all spiritual energies coming from above to subdue the forces of darkness. Whether I gave the example of God's the floods and this turning over of Sodom and Amorah and all that kind of stuff, or even the fact that we, as the Jewish people, we channel godly lights down into the world from above. By doing mitzvahs, we bring down the presence of God down to the world, which defeats darkness, which has powers from above. That's one thing. But then there's another type of a work, which we engage much more the world. We don't just download holiness from above, but we engage in conversation with the world. And that has many, many applications. One of its applications is doing mitzvahs. Mitzvahs means you're taking the materials of this world and you're seeking to find the point, the spark of holiness that's within the physical object, to reveal it, to uncover it, and to bring out the godliness that's within the world itself. And primarily that requires us to travel to all the various different locations and speak locally to each local, to each place, their language. If you want to transform, you see, a king can get everybody to comply with his will. He issues an edict from above, and everybody has to comply with the king's will. That's one way. Another way of doing it is on a much more thorough way. Again, you'll have compliance, and that's good, but that's not a thorough compliance. Another way is the king sends out agents, and to each local and to each province and to each state, You have people who know the language, know the makeup of society, know the social makeup, you know the way people are, you know what speaks to the people in this place, you know their needs, and over there you convince them that the king has of the king's agenda, what the king wants, and they all buy into it and accept it, and then they willfully join along. It's a tedious, it's a difficult, it's the difference of the system of democracy or the system of monarchy. In democracy, there's a problem. You have to get the votes. But we're talking about if it's for real, then you have to really go around and speak to the people from place to place and discuss it and speak to their needs and get them to trust you piece by piece until you put it all together, as opposed to a monarch who just gives off his decree and everybody has to listen and comply. So that's the difference. Let's take a look. It's so perfect now. The strength coming from Matos and the strength coming from Masei. Matos, what does Matos mean? As we said before, a stick. It shows the power from above. Even in the literal meaning, what is the subject matter of the beginning of Pashas Matos? What does God say? God speaks to Moshe and he says, speak to the heads of the tribes, and God gives a commandment. In other words, God is not engaging in conversation over here. God is giving an edict. He's giving a commandment. The verse is that the word that says right after it says, speak to the heads of the tribes. This is what God commanded to the king. So God is dominating from above. Pashas Masei it doesn't start with God. It doesn't start with the Torah dominating from above. What is the Torah telling us? Eile Masei b'nei Yisrael. These are the journeys of the Jewish people. Asher yatsu me'eretz Mitzrayim, that they went out of the land of Egypt. So we're talking about a dominance in the world, a taking control over the world, which starts off in a state of captivity. Initially, God's representatives in the world are in a weakened state. They're being held captive in the land of Egypt. With God's assistance, we were able to break free and start our journey to exit the darkness of Egypt. It means within our own souls to find our divine spark, our godly potential, and to start overcoming all of our other human faults and weaknesses and darknesses and satanic elements that are within ourselves. And slowly but surely master control, bit by bit, day by day, a little bit more over our own insecurities, of our own weaknesses, of our own darknesses, of our own lowly impulses and elements, and bit by bit work. It's a schedule, it's a regimen, it's an exercise, and then we influence slowly but surely our surroundings. And then we move from one country to another country, from one place to another place, until we transform everything. So that's not the powerful force from above. It's more like the strength of hitting the campaign trail and convincing people to be on your side. That's what it is. Beginning with ourselves and working our way. So this is a different type of the strength. Now, what's the strength of it? If you're moving from place to place, it's not strong. The strength is in the consistency. The consistency is that you're always moving in the direction of holiness. And sometimes you might have a reroute. Sometimes, you're on a road trip and you're going somewhere and there is a block on the road and you have to do a detour. And sometimes the detour involves getting back or going back on the freeway or the highway, going back a few exits and then coming around and taking a different route. But that's as long as you know where you're heading to, and your general course in life is to improve your connection to Hashem, improve divine mission in the world. And that's the idea of Masei. So Masei can be the story of the Jewish people going out of Egypt. It's the story of each and every one of us. It's the story of the collective a human experience where humanity is moving towards a godlier state, towards a holier state. Sometimes it looks like there are major setbacks. Sometimes it looks like we're falling back. In the 42 journeys that the Jewish people traveled, there are some of them that are named after sins. For example, there's one place that's called Kivros Hatava, where they buried those who lusted. Those were the people that complained they don't have enough meat, and God gave them meat, and many of them died, and they buried all those people there. That's a negative thing. The Jewish people, or the human being, has been governed has suddenly been overtaken by their base impulses instead of their higher divine. But as long as you take it as a lesson, and you fall and you do tshuva, and now you're getting up again, and now you know already how uncomfortable you were when you were buried in your lust. And we find ourselves many times that we become buried ourselves in our own lusts and our own unholiness. And when we recognize that I'm not going there again, from now on I'm going to be careful. That's an internal, deep transformation. That is everlasting. That is so powerful. That is so real. And that's the strength of Pashas Masei. That's the verse. We're traveling out of Egypt. It's slow. It's 42 encampments. It's 42 steps. And the Baal Shem Tov says that every person has 42 journeys in their own life. And we move. But as long as we're godly conscious and we're looking to improve ourselves and the world around us, we're moving in that direction. That's much stronger than if God intervened. Sometimes we wish God would intervene and knock out. There was a chassid who once came to the Alter Rebbe, Rav Shneur Zalman Aliyadi, left side. You're a tzaddik. Do laser surgery of my soul. And I have my left side is my evil inclination. Rebbe, I hate my evil inclination. That's also a level. We sometimes love our evil inclination. We want to hold on to it. We like certain parts of it because it gives us some pleasure and enjoyment. But this chassid was like so frustrated. He came into the Rebbe and he said, Rebbe, please do laser surgery and knock off, because the Rebbe going to do a surgery. It means with the power of his soul, of the Rebbe's soul, knock off my, zap my Yetzer Hara. I don't want to deal with it ever again. The story was that this person had moments in which the Rebbe's blessing kind of took effect, and he would be completely a different human being. He was a tzaddik. He was not. I think in the end he wasn't happy with it because he felt that it wasn't really his truth. It wasn't really who he was. So the work he wanted in the end, he acknowledged the idea that it's much better if you go the long route and you work it out on your own than if someone helps from above and gets rid of the tumor from above. It's not necessarily the best way to go. In any case, so that's the Masei the Rebbe says, and therefore the Rebbe says, we understand that the Chazak, when we're talking about triple Chazak, so that means we're not talking about just pure dominance when there's no one fighting you. Yeah, when there's no one fighting you and the way of dominance is all illumination from above, that's fine. But when you're talking about an enemy, a number two, a challenger, and now you're coming to number three, which is you're going to assert yourself and your truth after there was a challenge to your thing. Now the two methods of the stick or the journey is stronger and greater. And for that reason, the main chazak is in the end of Pashas Masei, not the end of Matos. Although there is what to say about the greatness of Matos. What's the quality of Matos? The quality of Matos over Masei, especially when it comes to God, is that you're talking about if God intervenes, God's strength is absolute and infinite and it has a certain force, a certain absoluteness that we as humans, as high and as strong and as determined and as consistent that we might be in our moving continuously in increasing holiness and godliness in our lives, we're still, being that we are part of the world, we have our limitations. So even our strength and even our consistency of our strength, is not as absolute and as durable. When God appears and God is the all-pervading, and the infinite, omnipotent being, of course, then the power is sharper and stronger. So there is what to say about when things happen from above. They're quick, they're fast, they're powerful, they're strong. But in as much as the transformation taking place It's powerful and strong. It delivers the message, but it doesn't convince as much. It doesn't transform the enemy. It's not as deep and as thorough. The quality of working from below is that it's more convincing, it's more transformative, it's more changing. But on the other hand, for example, you can affect your enemy or your challenger to and agree upon you, and then 2 weeks later, you come back and he makes the same argument. You say, "What happened? Didn't we go through this last time?" Yeah, he forgot already. He or she forgot already. Why? Because it was it's lacking in the force. If you chase them off with the stick, he'll remember for a longer time. You understand that there is something to say over here, and there's something to say for here. So the ultimate strength is when both of them combine together. What does that mean? That our very work in transforming the world through bit by bit and working our way through each local and traveling to each situation and going into it and transforming it from below should have God's blessing to it. That's the point, that God should be empowering it. God should be leaning in and giving it his blessing and his power and his oomph, that it should have the permanence of anything that God does. And when you have both of them together, our trajectory and our growth is consistently going with, it's almost like God is pushing us slowly, subtly from behind us. But since it's Hashem's assistance pushing us, we don't falter. We continue up. So you have the quality of thoroughness and also the quality of endurance. It's both of them together. And that's the ultimate combination. And that's the ultimate victory. When we can be victorious over the world and all of its perfection. Chazak, v'nis chazik, both together. So now let's wrap it up. So the Rebbe says, now we'll also connect this amazing idea of everlasting strength. Now we're going to connect it to the fact that this particular formula of chazak, the 3 times chazak, that is done in the end of Parshas Matos Mase, where the strength is coming from both directions. Why is it, by divine providence, the conclusion of the 4th book of Torah? I would think that this should have been the conclusion of the 3rd book, no, Leviticus, which Leviticus is number 3, and we're talking about the power of number 3. So the Rebbe says, is a very, very powerful idea. The reason why it's at the conclusion of number 4, the Rebbe is, by the way, now going to introduce another 2 numbers, 4 and 5. The main talk evolves around these 4 numbers, 3, 4, and 5. We did already 1 and 2 really, but 3, 4, and 5. Since we're talking about now the fusion of taking the qualities of the Matos approach, the nuclear approach, and taking which is the power and the strength, the unquestionable strength, uncontestable strength, and utilizing also the ability of the Masei approach, the working it out bit by bit from below, the transformation element, and taking these 2 powers and fusing them together, that too is number 3. 3 is a fusion of 2 powers together. So there's 2 types, however. When you fuse 2 things together, imagine taking 2 pieces of clay, and you take the 2 pieces of clay and you mush them together. So in the initial stages of merging the 2 pieces of clay together, you can tell that you stuck 2 pieces together. You can see, if you look carefully, you can see the place where there's a slight little crack, a little slot that's still there. The more you're squeezing it, the less it's thinner, but it's still noticeable that the two pieces were mushed together. But then you can take the 2 pieces, imagine doing this with 2 pieces of dough or 2 pieces of clay, and you roll it out again and again and again to the point that the 2 have merged together to a point that you can't even see the 2 merged together. Then that's the ultimate merging. The 2 have become so unified and so one that you can't even tell they're 2 things that were merged together. It's just a new entity. So the Rebbe says that is number 4. The quality of number 4, 3 is a quality where you can still sense that 2 things were merged together. They're merged, but you can still tell that that these properties belong to A. This is the quality that belongs to B. They're now working hand in hand to create to create C, and C is a merger of A and B together. But the ultimate product is to create D, or to create number 4, where they're so one. In other words, that we as humans become so merged with God that the infinite strength of God has become so assimilated into us. And we've become so intertwined with him that you can't even tell this is a merger of a human and a human force and a divine force has become completely one. Let's give the example in another example for that idea. Is we know that husband and wife are meant to become one. You get married, you become one. And it means, the verse says, in Genesis, a person should leave go of their father and their mother, and they should become lebasar echad, they should become one flesh. All right? That husband and wife become one flesh. So, what does that mean? Okay. You know, when you're born and you're a teenager and you're living a single life, you're living in number 1. There's no challenge to your authority, at least in your own little space, as long as this is my life. I have my own apartment, my own life. Then you're getting married. You meet someone else. In the beginning, it's beautiful, nice, and lovely, but after, it takes 3 months after your marriage, you wake up and you're realizing, oh my God, you're in a situation of number 2, and there can be conflict. Some marriages, don't make it through the stage of number 2. When after the dating stage, and sometimes you continue dating a few months into your marriage. You can do it a year, you can do it for the first year, you can do it even for 3 years, whatever it is. But at a certain point, you just want to be yourself, and your significant other also wants to be themselves. Sometimes, she's too cold and you're too hot. You want the air conditioning, you want the heat up. You want the air on, she wants the air. Out of all the conflicts that can happen, that's number 2. So then there's the work. There comes the marriage work, where you have to figure it out how to merge together and to create a synthesis, a unification, a harmony. And let's say a husband and wife will learn how to create a harmony until they become so beautifully unified. Her will becomes his will becomes her will. They can integrate, or they can create, they're learning how to compromise their wills together to create beautiful solutions. When they're not exactly seeing eye to eye, they can work it out together and really have a conversation and create, and that creates number 3. But even after you're creating number 3, you can tell it's 2 wills coming together and blended together. You can tell it's a blend. But then there's a 4th dimension. What's the 4th dimension? They have a child. What's the child? The child is the DNA of mom and the DNA of dad, father and mother together, creating a new entity that is both father and mother together, where there isn't like, this is this part, or this is that part. It's a new entity. So number 4, blend, and it says that according to some commentaries, when it says that father and mother, the man and woman, become one flesh, it means in their child, the genetics of 1 and genetics of 2 have created a new genetic makeup, which is number 4. Now, number 4, the emergence is so much more powerful. That's why the Rebbe says, interesting, that when you have a chair that sits on three legs, it's pretty durable. And if God is going to be sitting on this world on a throne of 3 legs, it's durable, it can work. But a throne of 4 legs is far stronger. So so that's the idea, because the ultimate strength in the world, that God can manifest his kingdom. That's what we're all here to do, to create God's kingdom and to create the unification of heaven and earth and make this world into a home for Hashem, that Hashem should sit on his throne. We have to reach the level of 4. And what's the level of 4? Is the work of 1, which is the revelation of godly light from above. The work of 2, in this case, is the elevation, the work that we do from below, from our own work that we from within the Masei elements, the working things out from below. And number 3, which represents the unifying the 2 chazaks together, the 2 strengths together, to create a hybrid of these 2 powers. But even when you have a hybrid, as long as you can still sense that I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm merging together 2 things, you still sense the merger. Reach a point where there's no more merger. It just becomes so unified and so one It's like we reach that level of complete fusion to the point that you don't even know it's fusion anymore. And that's number 4. So the Rebbe says, therefore, the ultimate strength, even though strength is after 3 times, it reaches a whole new dimension when it lands in the territory of number 4. And that's why the 4th portion of Torah, the end of Sefer Bamidbar, is when we have the combination of Matos and Mase together, because over here they're together in a level where you can't even tell that there's 2 elements together. Just a perfect fusion. Which leads us to the next point the Rebbe says, what else do we do on this Shabbos? We start reading portion number 5 in the Torah, the book number 5. What is 5? If 4 is already such perfect harmony that we can't even tell the 2 things were fused, what is number 5? 5 is uncovering. This is great. Now, why is it connected to number 5? Let's see why we're connected. Number 1, we're starting to read the 5th book of Torah. On the very Shabbos by Mincha, the afternoon service, we read the 5th book. So we're introducing the number 5. Number 2, the Rebbe says, is a great, we are blessing the month. This Shabbos, we're going to bless the 5th month, because we're introducing the 5th month of the year, which is the month of Menachem Av. Now, it's interesting, in the year the Rebbe spoke, we weren't blessing the month of Menachem Av. The Parashas Matos and Mase was actually the 2nd day of the month of Av. We were in the month of Av, but it would apply this year as well, because we're blessing the month of Av. And in the Hebrew months, Av is the 5th month. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av. Av is the 5th month. So now we are tapping the 5th dimension. What's the 5th dimension? Mind-blowing. The Rebbe says like this: God manifests himself and reveals himself to us through 4 letters of his name. Yud, K, Vav, K, the 4 letters of God's name. But these are all features of God. The four letters of God's name represent attributes and features and so on and so forth. There is the 5th dimension. And the 5th dimension is God's very essence, above all attributes and above all definitions. The essence of Hashem. It's hinted to that on the letter Yud, of the first letter of God's name, there's a little point showing that there's something beyond all these 4 manifestations, which is God's essence. So number 5 represents the essence. Now, why are we suddenly bringing God's essence in over here? So let's understand something. Why is it, and how is it possible that we can create such harmony in this world? And we can take opposite forces, opposite ideas, opposite energies, and fuse them together. And fuse them so much till they become one, when inherently they're not one. How can you take a man and a woman, who men are structured completely different than women, physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, on all levels, men are different than women. As much as they try to mess with that today, it is really unmessable. It is unchangeable. Men and women are completely different. So how does a husband and a wife become so much one until they create a child? How can 2 opposite forces become one? Where does that happen? The answer is, we have to dig into God and find a place where it's just God's essence. And from God's essence, everything comes from. And therefore, all the things are meant to complement each other, because they're all variations emanating from one singular, indivisible source. So number 5 is the source for the merger and the power that we're able to get. Number 4, it's the source. Let's start it. Number 5 is really the source for number 1. What's 1? 1 is the manifest, revealed presence of God's light. He's emanating his infinite light. Number 2, God creates a challenger, something the opposite. Where's that guy coming from? Is that not coming from the darkness, the Satan? Where's that guy? It's also coming from God. So number 5, which is the essence of God, is the source of number 1. It's the source of number 2. It definitely is the source of number 3, because 3 is starting to unify 1 and 2 together, trying to bring harmony between 2 opposites, between 2 forces, to unify 2 opposites together. That's because You have to trace it back. And especially to get to number 4, where they're so unified, you can't even tell two things will emerge. That's because of number 5. So 5 is the deepest truth that enables all these stages. And number 5 is when we uncover that ultimate truth, which is going to be revealed in the days of Mashiach. And that's the deeper concept of the month of Av, as we're going to see, the 5th month and the reading of the 5th Torah portion. Let's leave this to explore this a little better, Bezrat Hashem, in class number 2. Okay, everyone, let's see Mashiach now.